I was living in my first apartment alone in college in 2015. It was a Friday night and I was on Skype playing video games with friends. It was like midnight and there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw someone from my complex I had spoken to a few times on the other side of the door looking nervous and scared. I opened the door but kept the door chains on and asked him what was going on. He told me someone was passed out on the stairs and looked sick and he had heard me talking on my Skype call through the door, so he knocked on my door for help. I went out into the hall with him and he showed me the person passed out in the stairs. It was my across-the-hall neighbor. He was obviously very, very drunk. The other guy at the complex reached down to help him up and the neighbor pulled a messy swing at him. Missed completely. We talked him down and managed to get him up the stairs to his door, the drunk guy throwing sloppy swings every now and again at us. He took like 10 minutes finding the right key for his door. Every time we tried to help him he would get angry and try to punch us. He got into his apartment, closed and locked the door, and we heard him collapse on the ground on the other side. We called the non-emergency line wondering if this guy had alcohol poisoning or if he had drove home. No one was with him so we had no idea how he got back home, and he seemed drunk enough for it to be bad. Non-emergency came out and banged on the door for a good while before the drunk guy managed to unlock it and I heard an ambulance come and they took the drunk man to the hospital. I received a call from the police the next day saying he had to be hospitalized and his stomach pumped because of alcohol poisoning. Me and that other guy probably saved his life by helping him and getting him taken to a hospital. However, they also found a gun on this man. He was a criminal and not supposed to own a firearm and definitely did not have a permit to carry it around. He came back with it on him from wherever he was drinking. The cop said it was probably a good thing he was as drunk as he was because he forgot he had a gun on him, so he was throwing sloppy punches instead of pulling a gun on us when he was consistently angry at us through the encounter. I definitely could have died that night. I was about 11 with my 2 sisters and 2 brothers. I was home alone, the youngest being 8 and the oldest being 15. It was a stormy night with intense thunder, lightning, and rain. My step got a nosebleed and it wouldn't stop, so my mom and him went to the ER. Looking back on it now, it was a very weird reason to go to the ER, but we kids were left home alone. At one point we heard the doorbell ring. We looked out the window and nobody was there. Then I rang again, but before we could go check to see if there was anyone there, the lights began to flicker, and us being kids we were spooked and ran upstairs. Shortly after that the power went out and the house alarm turned on. We were all freaked and the 2 oldest grabbed kitchen knife and all 3 pets and we all ended up downstairs in a walk-in closet below the stairs. We had grabbed weights and piled them up against the door. Then we started frantically calling our parents, freaking out, but they were not so serious about it. Though we were just scared of the storm and told us they would be back in a little while. A couple minutes later we heard faint sounds coming from upstairs, then we heard the creak of the stairs right above us as if someone was coming down them. Each step scared us half to death. We all heard someone coming down the stairs. After the last step the sound disappeared and we didn't hear anything else besides the storm outside until we heard the parents open the garage and come down in the basement to find us camped out under the stairs. It was such a relief for all of us. Some of this story can be summed up to electrical shortages causing the doorbell to ring and the lights to go out, along with the alarms to go off, but those footsteps we couldn't explain and it still spooks me on who or what made those footsteps. I was home alone. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Mark. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I just felt lucky to have a place to live that wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the front door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room and looked down the hall. "Hello?" I called. There was just dead silence. Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark? Is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think that maybe he was trying to play some sort of weird prank on me. Maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered my room. When I finally got to the bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling the creepy vibes. There was no one there, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed, with my nightstand just to the left. I closed the door shut and walked back into the kitchen. I popped my dinner in the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to watch and relax. Suddenly I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then it happened again, and this time I could tell for sure it was coming from down the hall. "Mark?" I called once more. The microwave beeped just then and I nearly had a heart attack. "Yeah, sorry. Dropped something." I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food. And that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message. From Mark. "Hey dude, running a little late here at work, could you please leave the door unlocked for me?" My stomach dropped to the floor and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back, "Wait, you're still at work?" He responded only a few seconds later. "Yeah, why?" At that moment there was another noise from the hall and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running, instead it sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under a salt shaker. My family was at our beach house and I was at our home alone, hours away. I knew my father was coming back the next day. It was 11 p.m. and I was watching something on the TV. Pretty sure it was Criminal Minds or some other similar show. I heard a few footsteps on our front porch and am about to chide myself for my overactive imagination when I saw a figure go past the door's glass panels. This is the type of door with two decorative window panes on each side. I'm laying flat on the couch so I can see them both. This person laughs and I freeze. He, sounded like a he, went to sit on my dad's rocking chair and I heard a lighter and more laughter. I called 911 because there had been recent break-ins in the neighborhood but I thought they caught the guy. Seeing as I was a young lady home alone, I started having a panic attack. The 911 operator accidentally hung up on me then called back. The phone had never sounded so loud. I requested that the cops come to my house to chase away the person. She stayed on phone while I laid on the ground bawling like a baby. She told me the cops were there. She asked me if I saw him. I saw his flashlight and by then my mystery visitor had left. It took the cops 20 minutes to respond. She hung up. The cop got out of his car, looked in the backyard then got into his car and drove away. He never spoke to me. No one checked in on me. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next morning, while getting the mail, I noticed several off-brand cigarette butts near the mailbox. Not the type anyone I know smokes. I'm just glad I wasn't being murdered by an unknown assailant while the cops were busy not checking on me. Ugh. I love cops, but I have very little faith in the troop in my town. One evening, when they were alone at home, they heard footsteps coming from downstairs. It scared them a lot. They grabbed a kitchen knife, hoping it would protect them. Their heart was racing as they stood there, listening carefully for any more sounds of someone entering. They decided to send their dog downstairs, hoping it would notice if there was anyone there. They waited anxiously, hoping the dog would bark or growl if it sensed danger. But after a while, nothing happened, which was a relief but also made them feel more uneasy. They gathered their courage and slowly went downstairs themselves, every step making them more nervous. They held on to the knife tightly, ready for anything unexpected. When they reached the bottom, they looked around the dimly lit rooms, trying to find any sign of an intruder or a reason for the scary noises they heard. Once again, they found nothing unusual. The house was quiet, as if nothing had happened. But thinking about it later, they realized this wasn't the first time they'd experienced something like this. The strange sounds and footsteps had happened before, making them feel uneasy in their own home. Each time, it reminded them of how vulnerable they could be when they felt afraid and uncertain. This experience taught them an important lesson about staying strong when scared, trying to find logical reasons for fears, and finding comfort in familiar surroundings, even when they seemed mysterious or unsettling.